You now have a join page in place, and when you submit that form with a name and a room, it brings you over to the chat page with that data. Now currently, that data is not being used at all. In this lesson, we're going to fix that. You'll learn how to get access to this data from our client-side JavaScript, and we'll also talk about rooms in Socket.io. That's going to allow us to emit events to a specific set of connections, so just people in the South Philly room, so we'll be able to have separate chat rooms for any topic you'd want to talk about. Now, the query string component in the URL can be accessed via JavaScript using the following. I'm just going to crack open the DevTools real quick, and we'll explore that from the console before integrating it into our code. So right here, we have the console for this page. What we have access to is location, which is a global made available to you, dot right here, search. This contains the query string for the URL, and right here, we're seeing exactly what we have up above. So what we're going to do from our client-side JavaScript is parse this string to get access to the individual pieces of data for username and room, and we're going to send those off to the server. Now, to get this done, we'll be using that third library we included in our HTML file. So over in chat.html near the bottom, we've already used Mustache for rendering templates and Moment for formatting time. It's now time to use QS, which is short for query string, to parse our query strings. So this library makes it easy to parse this into an object with a username and room property. Let's go ahead and get that done inside of chat.js. And up top, we're going to go ahead and get that done right here where we're creating our templates. So just below that, I'll create a new section for options. And what we're going to do is use the following. It is capital QS dot parse. Now this takes the query string, and we just saw we have access to that on location dot search. Now by default, it's not going to remove that question mark, so it's actually going to create an object with two properties. One would be room, and the other would be question mark username. So there's an option we can use to make sure the question mark goes away. Right here, we provide that option on the options object, which is the second and final argument we'll be passing to parse. That is ignore, query, prefix. By default, that is false. We're just going to set it to true. So all that's going to do is make sure the question mark goes away. Now, what we get back, as mentioned, is an object. That object has all of the keys as properties, and the value for those properties is the value. So we have the username property, the string Andrew is the value, and the room property, the string South Philly, being the value for that. So we could go ahead and do one of two things. I could create a variable to store that object, or I could go ahead and destructure those individual properties off of the object, and that's the approach I'm going to take. So right here, I am destructuring the object that comes back from qs.parse. I'm going to grab the username and the room, and we are going to use those, sending them off to the server. Now we can go ahead and send this data off to the server by adding an emit call down below. At the bottom of the file, the last thing we're going to do is use socket.emit to emit a brand new event that the server is going to listen for, and this is going to be called join or something similar. Join is going to accept the username you want to use and the room you're trying to join. Then on the back end, it will attempt to get that done. Now, later on, we'll add some validation so you can't use a name if someone in that chat room is already using that name. But for now, let's just get the basics in place. So the second argument is going to be an object, and we are going to add the username and the room onto it. So we're sending that data off to the server. We can save this file, and it's now the server's job to set up a listener for join and to do what it needs to do when that event actually occurs. So in index.js, we're going to set up a listener for join. So we have listeners for disconnect, send location, and send message. Just above the one for send message, We'll be using socket.on for a fourth time in this file, and we're setting up a listener for join. Now we're going to get access to that data right here in the callback function, and we're going to use it to set up those separate chat rooms. Right here, the object we get back is going to be destructured, so we have access to username and room as individual variables. And then from here, what we're going to do is use the socket.io features given to us to actually join these individual rooms. So to do that, we use a method we can only use on the server, that is socket.join. Socket.join allows us to join a given chat room, and we pass to it the name of the room we're trying to join. So right here, what we're going to do is pass in the room string as the value to join. Now, what this is going to give us access to is a whole nother way to emit events where we're specifically emitting events to just that room. So only others in that room would actually see them, whether they're messages or anything else we might be sending from server to client. Now, so far, we've sent events from server to client using three methods. We had socket.emit, that sends an event to a specific client. We then had io.emit, which sends an event to every connected client. And finally, we had socket.broadcast.emit, which sends an event to every connected client except for this one. Now, with the introduction of rooms, we're going to have two new setups we'll be using for emitting messages. One is a variation of this, and the other is a variation of this. So the first is the following, io.to.emit. Now, to is indeed a function, and we'll learn how to call it shortly, but essentially what this does is it emits an event to everybody in a specific room. So that's going to allow us to send a message to everyone in a room without sending it to people in other rooms. The other option we have is a variation on this, that is socket.broadcast.to.emit. So similar to above, this is sending an event to everyone except for the specific client, but it's limiting it to a specific chat room. So these two approaches are how we're going to communicate with members of a specific room, and we're going to start to incorporate those right now. So the first thing we're going to do is take these two statements up above. We send our welcome message and an alert that someone new has joined. These are not things we're going to send on connection anymore. Now we're only going to send them when join fires, because that's where we get access to the username and the room name. So right here, let's cut those two statements out of their current location, remove those extra empty lines, and we'll be pasting them down below in the callback function. Now, this line right here is still perfectly fine. It's emitting the event to a specific socket, and that's great. Down below, what we have is our new user message. This is currently emitting the event to everyone but that specific client regardless of what room they're in, and that's a problem. We want to go ahead and limit it to just the room that was just joined. So right here, we'll be using socket.broadcast.to. So right after the T in broadcast, that is .to, that's a function, so we set up our parentheses, and we pass to it the string name of the room we're trying to emit that event to. In this case, it is stored in that variable. So we join the room right here, then we emit the message to that same room. Now the message is a new user has joined. We could include the username as well in that message since we now have access to it. Let's go ahead and remove the entire string and replace it with a template string. And right here, what we're going to do is use the following. I'll start off with their username, followed by a space, followed by the rest of the message. So something like Andrew has joined, and that's going to show up whenever a new user joins the specific room. Now that we have all of this in place, what I want to do is actually test out this behavior in the browser so you can see how it's going to play a pretty important role when it comes to us creating separate chat rooms for the individual users. Right here, let's go ahead and narrow that browser window so we can open up our application twice side by side. And over here, we're just going to crack open localhost 3000 another time. This time, we're going to have another user like Jess join that exact same room. So right here, I'm going to have her join South Philly, typed out exactly like I had done for Andrew earlier. And when she joins, Andrew gets that message saying Jess has joined because she's joined the room that he is currently in. Now, if she were to leave the room or send a message, currently that functionality isn't using the to method, so it would still get sent to everyone, but at least this portion is working. So let's go ahead and prove that Andrew would not see the join message if Jess joined a different room. So right here, what I'm going to do is open a new browser tab and close the old one. Right here, I'm going to open up localhost 3000 again. The name is still going to be Jess. The room will change though. I'll use a different neighborhood in Philadelphia, like Center City. And this time, when Jess joins that chat room, we don't see any message over here saying Jess has joined, and that is correct. Now, unfortunately, that's the only place we're using the to method, so if I send messages from one of those rooms, both rooms still get it. So for example, if I send test from Center City, the South Philly room is still getting that text message. This is something that we're definitely going to want to clean up, but at least to is working in the one place we've wired it up, that welcome message. Now, if we head back to Visual Studio Code, you'll notice that down below, this is where we have our other emit calls that need to change. Here we're sending a message to every connected client instead of just those connected clients in the room. We do the same thing down below for location messages and for disconnection messages. So these are all things that need to change. The problem is that we don't have access to the necessary data inside of these functions. For example, we need room. Room is scoped to this function. It's not accessible outside of it. So what we're going to need to do in the long run is keep track of which users are in which rooms. When we're tracking that data, it's going to allow us to use it anywhere in our application, such as when new messages are sent. Now, that'll be the topic of the next video. For now, just to show you what we're working towards, we're going to take the send message callback listener and tweak it. Down below, we have io.emit. What we're going to do is use io.to, calling that then .emit. Now, once again, we don't have access to the room variable right here. We'll fix that. For now, though, let's just provide a string and type out one of the two rooms we're using. So right here, I'm going to type out Center City. You should be typing out one of those two rooms that you're using over inside of the browser. Now, the end result of this is that all text messages are going to go to that one room. That's not what we want long term, but it'll at least allow us to see this behavior in action. So I'm going to save index.js. We'll head over to the browser and we'll give things a refresh. I'm going to refresh both of my clients so both reconnect. And now I'm going to send a text message from South Philly. I'll use from Andrew. This should only show up over here since this is the Center City room, and it does. And if I send a message from the Center City room, it should only show up here as well. So right now, our server is emitting all of those messages to a single static room. That is not what we want long term, but using to is going to allow us to achieve that behavior, assuming we track the users who are joining. Since we have the data right here, it is something we're able to track, and that's what we're going to focus on in the next lesson. So what did we do in this one? In this lesson, we learned about the to method, allowing us to target a specific room. Now, how does someone join a room? Well, we use socket.join. So the client gets the username and room name, it passes it off to the server, and the server sets all of that room behavior up. We're going to continue on in the next lesson, so stay tuned and I'll see you then.